Welcome to Introduction to Poetry, presented by Dr. Muhammad Al-Wishi at the London College of International Studies. This course is designed to take you on a comprehensive journey through the world of poetry, from its fundamental definitions to advanced analysis and creative writing. Over the next 3 hours, we'll explore what makes poetry unique, learn essential analytic tools, and discover how to both read and write poetry with confidence and skills. Course outline. Let's review what we will cover in this course. We will begin by defining poetry and understanding why it deserves serious study. Then we will explore the structural elements and the literary devices that poets use. We'll examine various poetic forms from around the world, consider historical and cultural contexts, and develop practical strategies for reading and analyzing poems. We'll apply these strategies through a case study, learn to write effectively about poetry, and try creating our own poems. Finally, we'll address common challenges students face and engage in interactive activities. This comprehensive approach ensures you develop both analytical and creative skills. By the end of this course, we will achieve four key objectives. First, you will grasp what poetry fundamentally and recognize its unique characteristics as a literary form that distinguishes it from other types of writing. Then recognize and name key poetic devices and structural elements, including rhyme, meter, stanza, and line breaks that shape poetic meaning. Distinguish different poetic forms and styles from various cultures and time periods, appreciating poetry rich global diversity, develop sophisticated skills to analyze and interpret poems critically, moving beyond surface reading to deeper understanding of layered meanings and artistic choices. Now let's move to the learning outcomes. You will read and comprehend a wide range of poems from diverse cultures and historical contexts, understanding how cultural backgrounds enriches poetic meaning. You will identify and explain literary techniques, including metaphors, simile, alteration, and personification with precision and confidence. You will analyze the relationship between poetic form and the meaning, understanding how structure enhances content. You will write original poems using learned poetic conversions, expressing your uh, unique voice through carefully chosen techniques. You will participate confidently in discussion about poetry, articulating interpretations, and responding thoughtfully to others' ideas. You will use appropriate academic conversations in poetry analysis and writing preparation you for advanced literary study. Now let's move to the introduction. What is poetry? Defining the genre. So let's begin with the fundamental question. What is poetry? Poetry is one of humanity's oldest and the most beloved form of artistic expression, dating back thousands of years to ancient civilizations. But what exactly is poetry? As its core, poetry is artistic language carefully designed to evoke imagination, emotion, and thought. This definition is crucial. Poetry isn't just decorated language or fancy writing, unlike everyday communication, which primarily aims to convey innovation clearly and efficiently. Like a text message saying, I'll meet you at 3 p.m. Poetry uses language as a medium for creating beauty, expressing complex feelings, and capturing moments of human experience in a way that transcends ordinary speech. When we read a poem, we are engaging with language as art, not just as communication. Um, Literary criticism context. Before we go deeper, it's important to understand where poetry study fits within the broader field of literary criticism. As its core, literary criticism involves three interconnected activities. First, interpretation, determining what text means, what themes it explores, what the poet is expressing. Second, analysis, examining how a text creates meaning through its formal elements and techniques like metaphor, rhythm, and structure. Third, evolution, assessing a text quality, significance, and impact on readers and literary tradition. These activities work together to deepen our understanding of literature and illuminate its cultural significance. When you analyze a poem, you are participating in this century's old traditions of literary criticism. Then let's go to poetry as artistic language. Poetry transforms words into art through deliberate choices about sound, rhythm, imagery, and structure. Every word matters intensely in a poem. Poets select language, and not just for meaning, but for texture, sound, and emotional resonance. Consider the difference between saying, the cat sat on the mat and the feline lodged upon the crimson rug. Both convey similar information, but the second creates a completely different sensory and emotional experience. This concentrated use of language makes poetry incredibly powerful. A short poem of just 14 lines, a sonnet, can contain as much emotional weight and intellectual complexity as an entire novel. Each word is chosen with precision and purpose. Wordsworth quote: the great romantic poet William Wordsworth captured something essential about poetry when he wrote, "Poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It takes its origin from emotion recollected in tranquility." This definition emphasizes two important aspects. First, poetry emerged from powerful feelings. It's rooted in genuine emotion and experience. Second, these feelings are recollected in tranquility, meaning the most reflects on experiences, shapes them, and crafts them into art. Poetry isn't just raw emotion poured, onto the page. It's emotion transformed through the artistic process into something structured and meaningful. Multiple interpretations. One of poetry's most distinctive features is that it invites multiple readings and interpretations. Unlike instructions for assembling furniture or a scientific report that aims for single clear meanings, poems often embrace ambiguity and layered significance. A poem can mean different things to different readers, and the same reader might find new meanings when returning to a poem years later. This richness allows poems to speak differently to different readers and to reveal new dimensions upon readings. Poetry honors the complexity of human experience by using complex, multi-dimensional language. This doesn't mean poems have no meaning or can mean anything you want. Interpretations must be supported by textual evidence, but good poems resist being reduced to single, simple messages. A structure and a form. Unlike prose, which flows continuously across pages and paragraphs, poetry uses deliberate line breaks, stanzas, and white space. These structural choices aren't arbitrary. They guide reading pace, create emphasis, and contribute to meaning. Where a line ends can dramatically change how we understand words. Consider how different these are. I love you more than anything in the world versus breaking it as I love you more than anything in the world. That line break creates a pause, a breath, a moment of emphasis on anything before we reach in the world. The visual arrangement of walls on the page is part of the poem's meaning. A white space isn't empty, it's active, creating poses and shaping how we express and experience the poem's rhythm and flow. Now let's move to rhythm and sound. Poetry emphasizes the musical qualities of language through rhythms, meter, rhyme, and sound devices. Even free verse poetry without format meter has rhythm created through word choice and line breaks. Poetry asks to be heard, not just read silently. This is why I always recommend reading poems aloud. You'll catch rhythms, sound patterns, and emphasis uh, that you'd miss reading silently when Shakespeare's writes, "Shall I compare thee to a summer day?" The rhythm itself, iambic uh, pentameter, creates a gentle, flowing musicality that enhances the romantic content. The sound of poetry is part of its meaning, not just decoration. Now let's go to sensory language. Poetry relies heavily on imagery and sensory details that appeal to sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. This concrete, vivid language helps readers experience poems physically and emotionally, not just intellectually. Rather than telling you the garden was beautiful, a poet might show you crimson roses heavy with morning dew. They perform drifting on warm June air. Notice how this engages multiple senses simultaneously. We see the crimson color, feel the heaviness and the moisture, smell the perfume, and sense the warmth. The sensory richness creates a more complete and memorable experience than abstract description ever could. Now, let's go to the purpose of poetry. Poetry serves multiple purposes simultaneously. It tells stories, sometimes entire narratives are compressed into a few stanzas. Epic poems like Homer's Odyssey prove poetry can tell complex tales. It expresses moods and atmospheres, capturing feelings that might be difficult to articulate in regular prose. Think of how a poem can capture the exact quality of melancholy of joy. Poetry reveals the character, whether of the speaker, the poet, or figures within the poem. Most importantly, poetry creates vivid imagery that allows readers to see, feel, and experience the world in fresh ways through carefully chosen words and innovative techniques. Poetry makes the familiar strange and the strange familiar, helping us perceive our lives and the world with renewed order, wonder, and understanding. It defamiliarizes experiences, making us see what we have stopped noticing. Now let's go to why study poetry introduction. You might wonder why poetry deserves dedicated study in an age of tweets, texts, and instant messages where we communicate in abbreviations and emojis. The answer lies in poetry's unique power to develop crucial human capacity that matter now more than ever. Studying poetry isn't just about appreciating an art form preserved in museums. It's about cultivating essential skills for thinking, feeling, and communicating in an increasingly complex world. In fact, the very skills poetry develops, close attention, nuanced interpretation, comfort with ambiguity, creative thinking, are precisely what's needed in our information saturated, rapidly changing society. Now let's go to cultural and historical expression. Poetry serves as a vital record of human culture and history. Through our civilizations, poets have documented their times, preserved traditions, challenged injustice, and given a voice to marginalized communities. Epic poems like Jelamish and Iliad preserve ancient cultures. Medieval Arabic poetry documents Islamic civilizations, slave narratives, and spirituals preserved African American experience. By studying poetry from different eras and cultures, you gain windows into diverse human experiences and historical movements that shape our world. Poetry carries cultural memory forward across the generations in ways that history textbooks cannot, because poetry captures not just events but feelings, values, and texture of lived experience. Enhancing emotional intelligence. Poetry develops emotional intelligence by requiring you to identify, understand, and articulate complex feelings, both your own and others, as you engage with poems expressing joy, grief, anger, love, and ambivalence. You expand your emotional vocabulary and deepen your capacity for empathy. Poetry teaches you that emotions are sophisticated, nuanced, and worthy of careful attention in a world that often encourages surface level emotional expression, a thumbs up or sad face emoji. Poetry reminds us that human feelings are complex. Reading a poem about grief teaches you that sorrow isn't simple, it's mixed with memory, anger, love, and acceptance simultaneously. This emotional sophistication is crucial for personal relationships, professional collaboration, and understanding our complex inner lives. Developing critical thinking, analyzing poetry sharpens critical thinking and interpretive skills applicable for beyond the literature. Poetry challenges you to find meaning in ambiguity, recognize patterns, make connections between disparate ideas, support claims with evidence, and consider multiple perspectives. These analytical skills transfer to every academic discipline and the professional field. When you learn to analyze how metaphor works in a poem, you're developing pattern recognition. When you support an interpretation with textual evidence, you're learning evidential reasoning. When you consider multiple valid readings of a poem, you're developing intellectual flexibility. Business leaders, scientists, lawyers, and educators all benefit from the analytical rager poetry study develops. Foundation for language arts. Poetry provides an essential foundation for language appreciation and creative writing. By studying how master poets use language, you become more conscious of word choice, sentence rhythm, and rhetorical techniques in all your communication. Poetry study makes you a more sophisticated reader, writer, and speaker across all contexts. After studying how poets create emphasis through line breaks, you'll notice how public speakers use pauses for effect. After analyzing metaphor and poetry, you'll recognize metaphorical thinking everywhere in political speeches, advertising, everyday conversation. Poetry tunes you to the artistry of language itself, making you both a more critical consumer and a more skilled producer of language. Imagination and creativity. Perhaps most importantly, poetry cultivates imagination, the ability to envision possibilities beyond the current reality in an era demanding innovation and creative problem solving. Imagination in an economic and social necessity, not a luxury. Poetry trains your mind to make unexpected connections, see familiar things from new angles, and think metaphorically and symbolically. When a poet compares hope to a bird with feathers, as Emily Dickinson's does, they're making a creative leap that eliminates both concepts. The same kind of creative metaphorical thinking drives innovation in technology, business, and science. The ability to imagine what if and make unusual connections skills poetry develops is exactly what employers and the graduate programs value. Now let's move to uh, poetry in the modern age. Poetry study also builds patience and attention in an age of distraction. A good poem rewards slow careful reading and rereading. This deliberate engagement with language offers a valuable counterbalance to the speed and superficiality of much digital communication in a world of scrolling and skimming. Poetry insists you slow down, pay attention, and think deeply by studying poetry. You're not escaping the modern world, you're developing precisely the skills needed to navigate it thoughtfully and humanly. The ability to focus deeply, to sit with complexity, to resist quick judgments. These capacities, which poetry study develops, are increasingly rare and valuable. Key structural elements introduction. Now let's turn to the building blocks of poetry. Poetry's power emerges not just from what poets say, but from how they say it. The structural elements of poetry, rhyme, meter, stanzas, and sound devices are the building blocks poets use to create meaning, emotion, and aesthetic experience. Understanding these elements allows you to appreciate the craft behind poems and analyze how form contributes to content. These aren't merely decorative features like frosting on a cake. They're fundamental tools for creating poetic meaning. A poem structure is inseparable from its meaning. Change the structure and you change what the poem means and how it affects readers. Rhyme and rhyme schemes. Let's start with rhyme. The repetition of similar sounds, typically line-ending rhyme schemes, are patterns of rhyme designated with letters A, B means the first and third lines rhyme, as do the second and the fourth. B means lines rhyme in pairs or couplets. Rhyme creates the musicality, making poems memorable and pleasurable to hear. It emphasizes connections between words and ideas. When love rhymes with above, the sound connection suggests a meaningful relationship. Rhyme provides structure and predictability that can be satisfied or deliberately disrupted for effect. And rhyme occurs at line endings, the most common type. Internal rhyme appears within lines. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary, slant rhyme or near rhyme involves similar but not identical sounds, love, and move, creating subtle connections rather than perfect chimes. Now let's move to meter and rhythm. Meter is the regular pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables in a line of poetry. Think of it as poetry's heartbeat. Common meters include iambic, stressed like a rise, uh, trochaic, stressed, unstressed like tiger, and anabistic, stressed like contradict. When these patterns repeat 5 times in a line, we call it pentameter. 4 times tetrameter. Shakespeare's famous "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day" is iambic pentameter. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day rhythm is the overall flow and be the poem created through meter, word choice, and syntax. Even free verse without format meter has rhythm. Think of how waves of jazz music have rhythm without the strict regularity. Understanding a meter helps you hear the music in poetry and recognize when poets use or break patterns for effects. Stanzas and line break. A stanza is a grouped set of lines in a poem, similar to a paragraph in prose. Common stanza forms include couplets, 2 lines, tercets, 3 lines, quatrains, 4 lines, on the others, quintains have 5 lines, sestets have 6, octaves have 8, stanza, organize thought, create visual pattern on the page, and establish rhythm. The white space between stanzas provides pauses that guide reading pace and emphasize transitions between ideas or images. When you see a stanza break, it's like taking a breath, a moment to absorb what you've read before moving to the next thought or scene. Line breaks, where poets choose to end lines, are among poetry's most powerful tools. Line breaks create emphasis by placing words at line's end, where they receive extra attention. They control pacing, speed you up, and slow you down. They generate surprise when meaning changes as you move from one line to the next. Sometimes they create multiple possible meanings. Consider the difference between "I love you more than anything in the world" as prose versus "I love you more than anything in the world" with a line break. That break emphasizes anything and creates a tiny pause that affects how we hear the line. In jambent occurs when a sentence or phrase runs over multiple lines without pause, creating forward momentum. I want to do with you what spring does with the cherry trees. And stopped lines conclude with punctuation, creating distinct pauses with words. These I think I know his house is in the village, though. Now let's go to sound devices alliteration. Now let's explore the sound devices that make poetry musical and memorable. Alliteration is the repetition of initial consonant sounds in neighboring words. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. You've probably heard that tongue twister, which uses alliteration to extreme effect. In actual poems, iteration is more subtle but powerful. It creates rhythm, emphasizes connections between words, and make language memorable. When Gerard Manley Hopkins writes The Windhover with lines full of alliteration, the repeated sounds create a sense of the bird's swooping flights. Alliteration draws your ear to particular words and creates associations between them. Now let's go to sound devices, assonance and consonance. Assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds within words. Fleet feet, sweep by sweeping geese, repeats the long G, I mean the long double E sound. This creates subtle musicality and links words thematically through sound echoes, unlike rhyme, which typically occurs at line ends. Accents can happen anywhere in lines. Consonance is a repetition of consistently sounds uh, anywhere in the world, not just at the beginning, like alliteration. Pitter, patter repeats the T sound in the middle of word. Consonance adds texture and cohesion through sound patterns that work almost subliminally or subliminally. You feel their effects even if you do not consciously notice them. Try reading a loud line with strong consonants and you'll feel how it creates a particular mouth feel and rhythm. Sound devices working together. These sound devices work together to create a poetry's distinctive music. They make language more memorable. Think how music easier. Tongue twisters are to remember their random words lists. They create connections between words and concepts, suggesting relationships through sound, and they add layers of meaning beyond literal definitions. When analyzing poetry, pay attention to how sound patterns enhance and reinforce thematic content. If a poem about violence uses harsh consonants, hard K and T sounds, the sound itself enacts the content. If a poem about flowing water uses soft sibilants, S sounds, and long vowels, the sounds mirror the meaning. The best poets use these devices subtly and purposefully, not as mere decoration, but as an integral part of meaning making. Common literary devices introduction. Literary devices are the special techniques poets use to create meaning beyond the literal language. These tools allow poets to say more with fewer words, create vivid experiences in readers' minds, and express complex ideas and emotion that might resist a straightforward description. Mastering the recognition and analysis of literary devices is essential for understanding how poetry works its magic. These devices aren't tricks or gimmicks. They're fundamental to poetic thinking and expression. When you understand how metaphor works, how symbols function, how tune shapes meaning, you unlock poetry's power and can apply these insights to your own reading and writing. Metaphor and simile. Metaphor and simile are comparisons devices that help us understand one thing in terms of another. Assembly makes explicit comparisons using like or as. Her smile was like sunshine, or he fought like a lion. Metaphor makes implicit comparisons without comparative words. Her smile was sunshine, or he was a lion in the battle. Both devices create imagery, evoke emotion, and help us see familiar things in new ways. When Emily Dixon writes hope is the thing with feathers, she is using a metaphor to help us understand the abstract concept of hope through the concrete image of a bird. Extended metaphors develop a comparison throughout an entire poem. The whole poem might explore hope as a bird, mixed metaphors often unintentionally combine incompatible comparisons will burn that bridge when we come to it. Mixes burning and crossing metaphors creating confusion rather than clarity. Now let's go to personification. Personification gives human characteristics, emotions, or actions to non-human things, abstract concepts, or animals. The wind whispered secrets, or death knocked at the door, or the sun smiled down. Wind cannot actually whisper. Death doesn't have hands to knock. The sun doesn't have face to smile. But personification makes these non-human things relatable and vivid. Uh, this device makes abstract concepts more concrete and relatable, creates vivid imagery, and often carries emotional weight. When John Donne writes Death, be not proud, his personification, death as a proud person how can be addressed, and the challenged personification helps readers connect emotionally with non-human subjects and can make complex ideas more accessible. Imagery introduction. Imagery refers to language that appeals to the sense, sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. Effective imagery doesn't just describe, it allows readers to experience the poem sensually and emotionally rather than telling us abstractly that a garden is beautiful. A poet using strong imagery might show us crimson roses heavy with morning dew, their perfume drifting on warm June air. Notice how this engages multiple senses simultaneously. We see the crimson color, feel the weight and the moisture, smell the perfume, sense the warmth. This creates a more complete and memorable experience than simply stating the garden was beautiful ever could. Let me emphasize this point about imagery because it's so central to poetry. Imagery appeals to our five senses sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. Rather than telling us about emotions or experiences abstractly, imagery shows us concrete sensory details. Instead of saying, I was sad about my show, rain striking down window panes, or an empty chair at dinner. Images that evoke sadness more powerfully than the abstract label. Good imagery is specific and concrete rather than vague and abstract. A red bird is better than a bird, but a cardinal picking at frozen berries is even more specific and vivid. Uh, Imagery types. Imagery can be literal, describing actual sensory experiences the poem presents, or figurative, using sensory language metaphorically. If a poem describes autumn leaves crunching underfoot, that's literal imagery. If it describes the dry leaves of memory crunching as I walk through the past, that's figurative imagery using sensory language metaphorically. The most effective poem often layer multiple images to create complex emotional landscapes. They might combine visual imagery of a storm with auditory imagery of thunder, tactile imagery of rain, even the smell of Zune, all working together to create a complete sensory complex that also conveys emotional weather. Symbolism. Symbolism is something that represents something else beyond its literal meaning. Rose doesn't just represent a flower, it symbolizes love, beauty, or passion. Common symbols include seasons. Spring symbolizes rebirth, winter, death, or dormancy. Color red represents passion or danger, white purity or death, and objects. Dove symbolizes peace across Christianity. However, symbols can be universal, recognized across cultures, or personal to a specific poem or poet. In Yeats' poetry, a tower or Gia has specific symbolic meaning within his work. Recognizing symbolism requires considering context and looking for patterns of meaning. If a poem mentions rain once, it's probably just rain. If rain appears repeatedly and this seems connected to sadness or cleansing, it's likely symbolic. Tune. Tune is the attitude or emotional coloring the poet brings to the subject, whether serious, playful, angry, melancholic, ironic, sarcastic, relevant, or any other attitude. Tune emerges through word choice, dictation, or diction, imagery, syntax, and other devices to poems about the same subject can have completely different tunes. A serious, reverent poem about death versus a playful, irreverent one creates entirely different experiences. Identifying tune helps you understand the poet's different experiences. Identifying tune helps you understand the poet's stance toward their subject and guides your emotional response to the poem. Consider the difference between the cat sat on the mat, neutral tune, and the miserable feline slumped upon the threadbare rug, melancholic tone, or the regal cat commanded the velvet cushion, elevated, playful tune, same basic content, vastly different tunes. Devices working together. These devices working together in sophisticated poetry, a single line might contain metaphor, imagery, symbolism, and careful attention to tune simultaneously. Consider this tune, uh, or consider this line, hope is the thing with feathers that bear cheese in the soul. It uses metaphor, hope as bird, imagery, visual imagery of perching, symbolism. Bird traditionally symbolizes freedom, spirit, and creates a hopeful, gentle tone through soft sounds and intimate direction or diction. The key to strong analysis is recognizing not just that devices are present, but how they work together to create meaning and effect. As you read more poetry, identifying these devices becomes increasingly intuitive, allowing you to appreciate the intricate craft behind seemingly simple lines. Overview, overview of poetic forms. Introduction. Throughout history and across cultures, poets have developed distinctive forms, established patterns, and structure that shape how poems are written and read. Some forms are highly rigid with strict rules about length, meter, and rhythm, like sonnets with their 14 lines and specific rhyme schemes. Others are loose and flexible, like free verse, which follows no predetermined pattern. Understanding poetic forms helps you appreciate how structure contributes to meaning and gives you models for your own creative writing. Forms aren't straight jackets limiting creativity. They're framework that can inspire innovation. Working within constraints often sparks creativity rather than limiting it. Now, let's go to the final slide today, talking about sonnet. So let's start with a sonnet, a 14-line poem, traditionally written in iambic pentameter. The Italian or Trachin sonnet, named after the 14th century Italian poet Petrarch, divides into an octave, first 8 lines, rhyming A, B, B, A, B, B, A, and sistit or sistit, a final 6 lines, often rhyming C, D, E, C, D, E, or C, D, C, DCD. This form often presents a problem or question in the octave and a resolution or answer in the sistit. The English or Shakespearean sonnet, perfected by Shakespeare, uses three quatrains, 4-line stanzas, and the closing couplets, 2 lines, rhyming A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. Each quatrain typically develops an idea, and the final couplet provides a turn, commentary, or resolution. Sonnets traditionally explore themes of love, mortality, beauty, and time. The form's compression forces points to be economical and precise. You have only 14 lines to develop your couplet thought or your complete thought. So thank you so much for watching me teaching you the first session of Introduction to Poetry. We will continue tomorrow. Until next time, Tata for now.